Kindness. We see it all around us. We see it when someone pays for someone else's coffee or holds the door open for another person. We see it in the smallest of gestures, like a smile or a kind word. But it's different when we turn on the news or social media. Oftentimes, what we hear about, what outlets are pushing, is the opposite of kind. Welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. Our goal is to give you a place to relax, to revel in stories of people who have received or given kindness, a place to inspire and motivate each and every one of us to practice kindness every day. Hello and welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. I wanted to start off today with a story, if you will allow me. My wife and I were grocery shopping at a store that we frequent quite often. And we had made our purchases and we had gone through the self-checkout and we'd bagged all our stuff and we were getting ready to head out. And we ran into our neighbor who happens to work at a Subway sandwich shop in this grocery store. And so we were chatting with her. And as we're standing there chatting to her, with her, not to her, with her. As I've said before, I have the mind of a golden retriever puppy, so I was looking around. And I happened to notice a lady who acts as the greeter at this store, but also, checks the receipts on the way out the door. And this woman, I know her slightly, not intimately. I don't know her very well. But if you were to see her and just say hello, you might think that she wasn't the kindest person. But if you talk to her, engage with her a little bit, you'll find that she's delightful. She's not a young woman, probably could be retired. But here she is, working at this grocery store. And as I'm looking around, as I'm watching her, people are leaving the store with their purchases. And this store has a policy that if you have something that is not in a bag, that this person, let's call her Nancy. We'll call her Nancy. I don't want to give her real name out. I don't want her to get in trouble. Nancy has to check your receipt. And it makes sense, right? It's a store policy. And most people don't have a problem with it. So people are leaving. They've got maybe, a case of pop soda, however you say it, on the bottom of the cart. And Nancy will stop them and ask them, and they will show her their receipt. And they go about their way. All of a sudden, some guy comes up, and he's got like 3 or 4 boxes in his arms. And, of course, Nancy stops him and asks for his receipt. And he stood there and he looked at her for a minute. And then he very huffily, is that a word? He puts his boxes on the ground and fishes the receipt out of his pocket. And as he's doing this, he leans closer to Nancy and he says something. Now I'm about 6 feet away. I can't hear what he says. But I can tell by Nancy's face that it was not pleasant. Her eyes got a little bit bigger. The corners of her mouth turned down. And she physically moved back a little. She looks at his receipt. She gives it back to him. He gruffly picks up his packages and he walks out. It was more of a storm, really. He stormed out. He was clearly not happy to have been asked to show his receipt. And I don't know what he said to Nancy. But after he'd left, I walked over to her and I said, "Hey, I saw that. And you didn't deserve that, whatever it was." And she just shook her head, and I could tell she was both angry and sad. And she looked at me and she said, "No, I didn't. I'm just doing my job." And that made me think, do you remember during the pandemic when stores would have masking rules in place? that if you wanted to go into a store or a restaurant or a bar or what have you, that you had to have a mask on. And do you remember seeing all of those videos of people berating the employees because they didn't want to wear a mask? And it wasn't the manager of the store. It wasn't corporate that took the brunt of the anger and frustration. It was the employees themselves. That was probably not our kindest hour in American history, right? We tend to take out our frustration on whoever is around. And oftentimes, more often than not, the person we take our anger out on, our frustration out on, is an employee. Somebody who showed up to work that day to do a job that they're being paid for, probably not as much as they'd like, but to make our lives a little easier, right? A cashier, a stalker, whatever you want to call it. This is an employee who showed up to work that day to help us have a better experience. And we ran into a policy that the store made up, that this person had no say in, that we didn't like, and it angered us, and we berated that person. That human being who had no say in that policy took the brunt of our anger. Recently, I've been seeing posts on Facebook, and it's regarding that policy that I spoke of earlier, the one where if you have something and you check out and it's not in a bag, that the person has to, the store employee has to check your receipt to make sure. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, here you have a case of pop. No, it's not going to fit in a bag. But, you know, they want to make sure that you didn't just pick it up off the shelf and walk out with it, right? And the posts I've been seeing are something to the effect of, if I have to check myself out, I'm not going to show you my receipt. And it's a ridiculous argument as far as I'm concerned. You don't have to check yourself out. They still have lines available. You might have to wait a little longer than if you went to a self-checkout station, but you'd still have somebody else check you out. Our sense of entitlement in this country is off the charts, I think. But that's not the point I want to make. My point is, as we go about the holiday shopping season coming up here, there will be times when we are frustrated. Maybe a store didn't have something we needed, and we maybe even checked the app, and it said it was there, but it wasn't. Before we go off on some minimum wage employee, let's stop and think. Did this person have anything to do with the fact, whatever it was, that frustrated us or angered us? And if the answer is no, if you can think that in like 2 seconds, and if the answer to that question is no, save it. Put it in an email. Thank the person for showing up that day, and go home and write an email to corporate. Because that's where your anger lies. It's not as satisfying as venting at some low-level employee, but it's the right thing to do, the kind thing to do. A friend of mine, I had her on the show a while back, Lisa Metwally, she had the best idea. And she said she would go into a checkout lane, and maybe the person doing the checkout was friendly, maybe they weren't. But she said she wanted to do something for them to make their day just a little better. So she'd ask them, she'd say, A friend of mine asked them to buy them a candy bar, but I really don't know what they like. What's your favorite? And 9 times out of the 10, the cashier will tell you what their favorite is. So she'd buy that candy bar. And then, after she'd packed up all of her groceries and was getting ready to walk away, she turned and she gave that cashier the candy bar. And the look on their faces that she would get was just worth more than money can buy. So I'd like to propose a kindness challenge. As you go about your holiday shopping this year, look for the employee who looks like they might be a little stressed out. And it doesn't cost anything. You can do like my friend Lisa said, and buy them a candy bar. But all you really have to do is say, how's your day going? And stop and listen. Or say, thank you for showing up to work today. I appreciate the fact that you made it in and the fact that you're here. You made my life a little easier. These little things can wipe away any ugly words they may have heard from another customer. It can make them feel good. It can make them feel seen and appreciated for what they're doing. And if you do that, every time you go shopping, even if you're frustrated or angry about a store policy, you will make somebody else's day better. And since this is the season of gift giving, what could be a better gift than the gift of kindness? What could be better, both for ourselves and for the recipient, than to be kind to somebody else, to make their day, to make them feel seen and appreciated? I can't think of anything better than that. So, as we go about our lives this holiday season, I challenge you to take 10 seconds, a minute out of your day to tell an employee, whether it's a cashier or a stocker, and I mean S-T-O-C-K-E-R, not S-T-A-L-K-R, a waitress, a server, any kind of employee, a flight attendant. I'll throw that in for Lisa Metwally. Take the time, take a few seconds out of your day and thank them for doing the job they're there to do. Thank them for showing up. Thank them for being them. Really. Because that's the best gift that anyone can give. You've been listening to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. We'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, be that person who roots for others, who tells a stranger that they look amazing, and encourages others to believe in themselves and their dreams. Have a fantastic week.